And that brings us to, unbelievably, the FY 2017 budget already. So we're ahead of the Missouri legislature in terms of the budget, right?
They've actually, right, they haven't, the conference, but the committees have not. So good evening. I want to start talking about the fiscal year 17 budget. Start this presentation by looking at fiscal year 16 and where we're going to end the year projected. So as we talk about our budget, we want to look at our major sources of revenue. The largest source of revenue for the Raleigh School District is the basic formula, the foundation formula that we receive from the state. That represents about 34.5% of our total revenue. Therefore, it's important to understand how the state is performing and what the state budget is doing, because we are dependent on receiving state dollars. The state has seen positive trends through March. The fiscal year 16 state budget was built on revenue increase of 3.6%. Actually, through March, it is 4.2%, so that is good. The state is very dependent on individual income tax and very strong returns in that area, so it is up 5.6%. As you will note, corporate income tax, which is a much lower percentage of the total general revenue, is decreasing. Part of that has to do with corporate franchise tax. Has been gradually phased out in fiscal year 16. They are no longer collecting corporate franchise tax. So that's part of the 12.3% decrease. We also see an increase in the refunds of 4.1, so that has a negative impact on the total revenue received. Anytime through this, if you have any questions, please let me know. Other components of the state budget that impacts revenues to the school district, part of the foundation formula, the casino tax revenue, which is part of the classroom trust fund. The budget for fiscal year 16 was built on 11.8% growth. Because the results were so poor last year, they had already projected revenues, and obviously they will not achieve those revenues. Through February, it was a 2.8% growth over prior year. It does appear as though that revenue stream is no longer losing, so there is some growth, so that is a positive trend as compared to last year. Lottery revenue through February, only a 1% growth. So those two pieces, and that's important as you understand that when we look at fiscal year 17 budget, what was approved at the state. So kind of keep that in mind, those growth amounts.
Certainly advertised.
State adequacy target for the current year, so for March, for fiscal year 16, was $6,110. And because of House Bill 1689 that was passed last year, we no longer have a proration factor. The state adequacy target serves as the lever to adjust the amount of money that's going to the school district. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fiscal year 17 state budget. Difference of opinion between the governor and the legislator on the general revenue growth, what to base the budget on. There is a range from 3.1% to 4.1% growth over fiscal year 16 revenues. As I had mentioned, House Bill 1689 tells DESE that they cannot use a proration factor any longer in the formula. So therefore, the state adequacy target will have to be established by DESE based on the number of dollars that is appropriated to Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Sort of the same thing.
Exactly. The governor had proposed $85 million increase to the foundation formula. The House has approved a $70 million increase, The Senate approved also a $70 million increase. However, there are differences on where this money is coming from. The Senate approved $42 million for the foundation formula coming from general revenue, and the House approved $47 million. So that difference, that additional $30 million, that is from the casino fund and the lottery fund. So therefore, if the state is not achieving the proper growth in those areas, we run the risk next year of not reaching the goal. So that is where there is going to be some differences that they will have to go into conference committee and determine exactly how they will fund the foundation formula. So the goal is to approve the budget, send it to the governor, and with enough time in order, if there is any vetoes, for the legislators to have time to look at that. So we'll see how that progresses. Okay, so the foundation formula, given those that bit of information, the foundation formula for fiscal year 17. Again, about 35% of the district's operating revenue comes from this revenue source. The estimates for the state adequacy target range from $6,080 to $6,131. If we had a fully funded formula, which we don't really talk about much anymore, it would be $6,808. So obviously, we're not close to that. So there is a Senate Bill 586 that will reinstate the 5% cap on the state adequacy target. I think you guys have received some literature regarding that particular bill. The advantages of Senate Bill 586, because it would lower the state adequacy target, then there's a chance that it would be funded closer to the level that it should be, I guess is the theory behind that. So again, we will see if that is passed this year. We've talked in the past about the foundation formula basics. Our current formula was passed in 2005, and there are various components to the current foundation formula. This particular slide, I just wanted to show a history of the state adequacy target and what it has done over the past few years. So back in fiscal year 09, the state adequacy target was 6,117. Every 2 years, this particular piece of the foundation formula is recalculated. And as you see for fiscal year 17-18, what the state adequacy target would be based on the current calculation.
You're going to get yourself in trouble showing that slide.
I'll move on. So the percentages before House Bill 1689, we did have some proration factors that were part of the foundation formula, and that's just a history, so we no longer have a proration factor. One of the other components of the foundation formula to determine weighted average daily attendance is the weighting thresholds. So we get additional weights for different types of students that we may have in the district. So I will point out for fiscal year 17 and 18, this will help our district because the free and reduced lunch percentage is down. So we will get more weight for that. So that's good news for our district. This is a very small slide. I thought maybe we could see it a little bit better, but this is the calculation of current year and next year. So this is using, right now for next year's budget, I'm using a state adequacy target of $6,090. Once we get better information, that may change. For every $10 change in the state adequacy target, that means about $40,000 to our district. So depending on where we land. So before I had said that the range that I'm reading is from $6,080 to $6,131. So that's a range of $204,000 that we could receive additional if it lands on the higher side. You will see I use the same weighted average daily attendance as our current numbers, but you will see on line 1, fiscal year 17 has a higher number, and that's because the weighted thresholds, we get more weight for the free and reduced lunch. So that actually adds about 10 more students to this calculation. So that is good news for us. So this calculation indicates that we will receive $14.5 million next year if the state adequacy target is 6,090. So moving on, the second largest single revenue source is our local property tax. Again, the calculation is simply the assessed value times our tax rate. Every other year is a reassessment year. That is the odd years. So 2016 will not be a reassessment year. Also, this year we will roll another 10 cents of the operating levy from our 2015 levy increase that we had, the 25 cents. So this year we will have another 10 cents added to that. The third largest revenue source, Proposition C, is the 1% statewide sales tax. Sales tax is collected throughout the state. It's not kept at each individual local political subdivision, but it's collected statewide and then redistributed throughout the state. So this was passed in 1982 as for the state of Missouri, and it established a 1% sales tax. So if we look at the three major revenue sources, the property tax, Prop C, and the foundation formula, we look at our budget for fiscal year 16, our estimate right now for 17, that would indicate an additional $388,000 of revenue. So let's look at the expense side. As we look at our operating expenditures, as we have talked many times, our largest expenditures are salaries and benefits, about 80%. Our three large components or changes to our budget each year include our health insurance costs, movement on the salary schedule, and percentage change to our base salary. Right now, I'm using a 10% health insurance change. We don't know what will be necessary next year. If I had to estimate right now, I would say 10% is very high. It's probably 5 or 7%. We have seen some improvements in our health insurance based on the changes that were made, so I don't believe it will be necessary. But it's really too early to tell. We just have 6 months worth of data on our new plan. Movement on the salary schedule, what that means is every a person moving down, so gaining a year of experience, and then anyone who has additional degrees or has gone back to school moving over on the columns on the salary schedule. And the percent is simply just adding 1% to the current base. This particular slide shows our last year annual secretary to the board report, and this is a state report that is required to be submitted to DESE by April 15th each year. I'm sorry, by August 15th each year. Last year we finished with reserves of in the operating fund of $13 million, and that represented unrestricted fund balance of 34.7%. This Slide just shows a few, the past few years where our unrestricted fund balances have ended each year. And we have just, we've used a little bit of reserve each year, not drastic change, but a little bit of change each year. As you know, historically, we have not spent all of the budgeted expenditures, and we have finished better than what the budget has indicated. So as I look at where we finished the current year through March, based on how we are trending, I would say that we're probably going to end the year at about 32.8% unrestricted fund balances, which would mean about a decline of $230,000 in our reserves as compared to last year. This particular slide shows the actual dollars, what the projected balances are in the funds. As we have discussed before, our budget process, we talk to building principals, directors, to try to determine what needs that they may have for the upcoming year to build the budget. You as a board will approve various portions of the budget throughout the budget cycle. The supply textbooks, those were approved actually back in January. Building and grounds, you just approved tonight. We will come to you at the May 12th board meeting with a salary recommendation, and then June 9th, final approval of the fiscal year 17 budget. So any questions that?
Very good. Thank you.
Great, thank
Thanks.
you.
You're welcome.
It's good. Lots more work to do.